2024. Can you have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Younger is absent. Councilmember Berry.
Present.
Councilmember Goodman.
Present.
Councilmember Hegestad is absent. Councilmember Beard.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hustis.
Here.
Mayor Osborne.
Present. Thank you very much. Item number 2 is workshop items. 2A is presentation and discussion regarding the landing specific area plan. We'll kick it off with Sean Bonda, senior planner.
Mayor, I appreciate it, Mayor, members of the council. Welcome. This is going to be the third of our workshops here. We actually had one with the Planning and Zoning Commission just last month, and as well as had a general one with the public. So we're here to gather information about this exciting project called the Landing. Part of our general plan is as the Gateway Activity Center. We've named it the Landing with such logo representing the auxiliary field this evening. But we're going to gather information and take that information and well, I'm not going to take the information. Matrix from Ed Boyk is going to take that information that he's gathering from this meeting and take it to in a consumable format that we're going to take forward for hopefully for approval soon. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to hand the time over to Ed Boyk from Matrix.
Cool. Thank you, Sean. And I apologize for my voice today. I'm getting over bronchitis, but you guys are important to me, so that's why I showed up, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
But because of that, I'll also try to keep this a rather short presentation and to the point. Really quick, for the benefit of everyone, I'll go through the project overview really quick and talk about some of the progress we've had so far, the milestones, and then go through some of the draft land use scenarios that have been part of those workshops over the last month or two. So really quick, this is a specific area plan, and we've talked about this once before. This is a tool that allows for, conversely, and very intuitively, it's not a general plan, whereas generals is more specific, but it also gives you the ability to do some more enhanced land planning and even regulatory tools to help you bridge the gap until more robust zoning standards are put in place for this area. And as I noted before, the extent of the regulatory tool that is anticipated at this point is primarily focused on the public rights-of-way, public realm, streets, public amenities, trails, and things like that, and provide rather more of the policy guidance for any zoning or design at this point that would be effective on private property, just so that we can continue to have those open conversations with the landowners as the plan gets implemented. So really quick, this is the area that is along and south of I-10 at Dorado Way. It contains the old Blue Air Force Base auxiliary field, as well as a good chunk of land that is under the purview of Maricopa County Flood Control District. Over 2,000 acres, 3.5 square miles, so it's a big area, and there's a lot of opportunities there. So as Sean noted, we did have, this is the third of this set of interactions with different entities. We did have some community meetings early on in the year. We had really good attendance at a community meeting up in the landing area at Summit Church, and we had lots of attendees show up. 47 for sure, more than likely about 65 to 70. Some people don't sign in. Lots of boards and activities, 180 comments received. And then more recently, we had over 60 attend an in-person update that showed these land use scenarios here at City Hall East in the landing. And we showed the 3 future land use scenarios, went through a presentation, got 81 comments, whether they were verbally provided to us or written on a comment card or provided on the draft concept land use scenarios as well. The technical committee of city staff has been intimately reviewing these scenarios, as well as providing us additional direction on how to make sure this is not just a pie in the sky plan, but something that can work. So something that can be implemented. So each of the committee members gave us some markups and direction and gave us guidance on many of the policies that are being adopted and moved forward for integration and to be related properly to the landing plan area. Planning Commission did much like what you did. Theirs a little bit hands-on, a little bit more hands-on. Yours is going to probably be hopefully a bit more directive with policy. But they went through all of these different land use scenarios. They gave us some ideas for plans and policies and goals and pitfalls that they foresaw for the area. And we've got that put into our stock of comments as well as we're beginning to flesh out what this plan looks like from a draft of goals, policies, actions perspective. So one of the things that's driving our decision making, and we've yet to get the final, but some of the early findings from the draft market study that we provided to staff and discussed with staff are that there is a lot of household formation, a lot of households that need to be developed in the West Valley of Phoenix metro area. In particular, Buckeye is in the position to absorb a great quantity of those houses, which will drive a lot of the development that could occur in the landing. In short, what our economic consultant is telling us right now is that whatever number of units that are 8 to 11,000 that is negotiated with Luke Air Force Base through the graduated density concept, that amount of housing can easily be accommodated and picked up by the landing itself, which is really good news because the housing that is needed is going to support the economic opportunities that could come in this area as well. One of the things that the economist is working on is trying to see what that max threshold might be so that we can understand how many more houses, how many more dwelling units might be able to be put into this landing area and further enhance the market opportunities in the landing. I mention that because, again, this is 3.5 square miles, over 2,000 acres. As it is right now, there's a lot more room for development in there, and especially if the aspirations of having an intense mixed-use area remain through this period, and the economics and market study says that can be realized, and here's your horizons, then from what we understand, that's something we probably want to continue to promote through this plan and strategies for how to interact with Luke Air Force Base, and other players as we move towards the conclusion of this project. So, importantly, the housing is trying to capture an audience that we currently aren't completely capturing in Buckeye, and that being a lot of younger professionals, small families, people who are just getting started, that don't desire to have a formal detached single-family home, but somebody who wants a more dynamic living environment that's perhaps even a mixed-use building or a more dense apartment buildings in a more of a walkable environment. And that's what the landing has always been predicated upon from the beginning, is that as a target market that is prime an opportunity to select here. So other industries that will help align with that could be part of the economic solution include those financial services, professional technical services, research and development, education, health services, and some of the technical trades that are being developed in programs with WestMech right now. If you can get that confluence of education, high technology, high-paying office Class A type jobs, you can really create an incredible node here that's going to capitalize upon the existing assets, the burgeoning assets, and those assets yet to come.
Just so to know, WestMech is misspelled.
I see that and I apologize. I know to put the T there. Draft land use scenarios. So this is where we're looking for a little bit of feedback from you. Mostly, I would consider this to be a good workshop if I could find out what do you like, what elements would be good to pull from other ones. Also, if there are things that are just non-starter stuff that we should not even continue to think about because of the complications with it, the impracticality, or whatever it might be. Now I'm presenting them to you because they are drafts, they are concepts, they are not fully fleshed, and they don't represent a use allocation that's necessarily grounded in reality. That's the next iteration. This is to get the concepts out there, give you something to see and react to, and then from that we will take the market study information, the guidance from this meeting and all the other meetings, and pull it together in a more refined, final selected land use approach for this area. So some of the general considerations is that in all of these cases, campus-style development is likely to be best supported north of Van Buren because of the exposure to I-10, lots of visibility, more suburban nature, and lots of land that's not necessarily suitable to be developed in a more of a master plan area other than to support those campus opportunities, whether it's a medical campus, research campus, education campus, or some sort of economic driver that's going to want to have exposure in I-10. There's a huge recreation opportunity in co-use Maricopa County Flood Control District, as we talked about, closer to Jackrabbit with the Flood Control District Basin. So that still remains as a very desirable outcome through all of our interactions and outreach so far with all stakeholders. The design, character, and theming of this entire development will be developed and carried through all the different sub-areas that are part of this. And I classify, we see this area as having 3 areas. The area north of Van Buren that's already well under development, the area by the Flood Control District Basin that is more of a recreation center point, and then the estate land chunks that are south of Van Buren that are the real meat of the opportunity that could be developed in the landing area. So the design, because we have these 3 different flavors inside the landing, the design elements, the theming, the trails, the signage, wayfinding, should carry throughout that area so that people know where they're at. It's really, that way you create that strong identity, a marketing piece for that area. As for economic development strategy, because this is trying to make something occur that's probably going to need some city support, that partnership's important. The economist is going to be developing some strategies, or at least giving us examples as well of what has worked in similar circumstances elsewhere, what tools might need to be promoted at a state level to help, prime the pot or prime the engine a little bit more. So Arizona's got a pretty limited scope of economic tools that are available, as we all know. So if there's more we can promote, we'll make sure that those get in front of you as well for consideration. It's very important to the public that arterial performance is managed. So we are making a commitment with any of these land use plans and working with the city staff as well, that the arterials will not become clogged or delays. They will get people to where they want to be, and we will give them every reason in the world to want to get to the middle of this area and do their shopping, living, and working and playing in this area as well. But nonetheless, knowing that I-10 needs another interchange at Dean Road, knowing that the Verado interchange is going to slowly becoming, having a poor level of service, it's important that we make sure that throughput of those roads is maintained despite any lane planning that might occur. Again, working with Luke Air Force Base, and I mentioned the future Dean Road. So, this first one is illustrating, and again, a very broad concepts of a neo-traditional setup. This is very similar to some of the land planning that was done with Verado, in that you have neighborhoods that are abutting more of a central core area where that dark red area is with the small asterisk, or the larger asterisk in it. That could be a good civic event, activity, economic driver of an area. You'll notice that Verado Way kind of splits there. That would create a northbound, southbound one-way couplet around that area, which I'll show in another slide, which would be a really neat marketing opportunity to drive people towards that visually, but then inside that area, create a very welcoming and safe, one-of-a-kind pedestrian experience for this part of the state. Not unlike Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado, as an example, where it's a pedestrian-oriented area, lots of dining, nightlife, activity, and so on, very special.
Didn't Pearl Street grow up around an area that was already done?
So that's
Like they dropped it in afterwards?
So that's part of the difference here. We are going to be, this is an opportunity to create it from scratch and let that occur with this plan and vision in mind, whereas Pearl Street or other pedestrian areas, you're right, they were built environments that supported that as a conclusion. We can build a framework with this plan ahead of time to consider that. So that's what we're trying to put as one potential solution. Does it have to be a pedestrian way like Pearl Street? No, it might be even like a slower road, smaller scale, lower traffic speeds, that pedestrians can feel safer at, and we can have the outdoor dining, outdoor activities nonetheless in that area. It's just provided as a visual example of what could be an outcome for that. Also, it doesn't have to be as big as represented here. In fact, if you built it as big as represented here as an activity, economic, commercial core, is probably far too much land for the market that's there. So we know that has to be scaled back, but for the purposes of introducing the concept, we wanted to make sure it was big and shows what that maximum opportunity could potentially be. So the density for, go ahead.
Just to back up and for perspective on this, the size of area we're talking about, how does this relate to like a, say a downtown Tempe or a downtown Phoenix?
Yep.
Or ASU's campus in
Right.
Tempe?
This is probably more similar to downtown Tempe plus ASU's campus, and then probably down Apache quite a bit
Yeah.
in that area. Because it's a large area, and the scale can get misleading in this large area. That's nearly 1 mile north to south, and probably, this is rough, and it's not really to scale, but maybe a third of a mile east to west. It's a large area, and the reality is that we have some other concepts to illustrate more well-regarded but more smaller-sized downtowns that we could show and illustrate how those look in the concept of this entire area. And why it's important we mention this is that there's a lot of land to plan here, and it's important we understand the scale.
Mayor,
Appreciate that. Yeah.
From what the numbers were you were throwing out earlier, you're looking at residential about 17,000 people?
Correct. And if you're looking at the numbers of around 3 to 3.2 per unit, 8 to 11,000, that's accurate.
Have you been on Verado in the morning
Yes,
and seen it packed up all the way to Van Buren?
yes,
So who's going to rebuild the bridge on I-10?
correct. That's some of the considerations that we're being careful of, is that we don't overplan the area without thinking about how it interfaces with those other transportation infrastructure requirements.
It's already backed up.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about 17,000 people in an area that right now backs up a mile just to get on any interstate highway. It only has one lane going right into the city. You're looking at the retail that isn't even there yet. You're looking at completing McDowell over to Rainbow, over to Jackrabbit,
Right.
where there are only stop signs. Who's going to advance this and get this something going on the streets instead of building buildings? We already have warehouses up there. Are there any plans on putting more warehouses and more hospitals before we start planning on 17,000 people in about a 4 square mile area?
Okay, so Councilman, to answer your questions, whether or not we do this plan for the Buckeye Landing, that number of units is going to be built in this area. It could be all single-family homes. It could be according to the plan that we're developing right now. Some developer will buy the land from state land and the other entities out there, and 17,000 people will end up there because it matches what Luke Air Force Base has outlined as part of their graduated density concept. So in any case,
Luke Air Force Base doesn't vote on that.
correct. The zoning that's in place as well can allow for much of that, as well as the land use planning that's already in place through the general plan. As with any development, the city always looks at traffic numbers, traffic management before decisions made, because it is not a good decision to make things worse without having the development community pay their required share to keep that infrastructure safe and healthy and flowing. So while, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that state highway? Don't we have to get the money and have the state develop Verado and I-10 just like they're doing over in Jackrabbit? Oh, let's see, they're not doing that. To have the state do that work, not the city. I mean, we've got to rely on the state to do that with their money. And they've already pulled the funding to widen I-10. So where are we going to get the state to cooperate to rebuild the interstate highway that we're going to need for this?
And Councilman, I don't have that answer today, but I do believe that your traffic engineers and city engineers have considered that as part of our discussion with this already. And they are aware that none of this really gets off the ground without those interchanges being put in place and upgraded. So we know that for the land planning, we're going to anticipate that those solutions and methods will be put in place. But that will be confirmed as this plan moves through draft into final. And a lot of that still, how do we interact with ADOT? How do we interact with the federal government? How do we interact to make sure that those infrastructure improvements get put into place? So I don't have those answers today, but we are well aware that those are important. As for the other considerations, I think you had mentioned, you said that the interchanges and planning to put these hospitals in there and warehouses. At this time, the land plan is not encouraging, through our concepts, more truck traffic through warehousing situations to be considered. Now, again, that's why we're here right now. We want to talk this out. There is real opportunity to create enhanced opportunities here with the hospital campuses and education facilities in that area. So finding ways to develop more robust industries that are not predicated upon warehousing and logistics might be an opportunity that's worth moving towards to create more uniqueness and energy in a new economic market in Buckeye that is just getting off the ground right now, which is why I refer to research and development, education, and things like that, or high tech. So there's a lot of industries that could be accommodated. When we've had our conversations with state land, one of the things they mentioned to us is they would like us to give some predictability, with the land planning, but also give us flexibility, which is really state land's mantra. So there might be some opportunities to keep some of those things in reserve should another larger high-tech opportunity come along that sees this as being an ideal location. So those are all being reviewed as part of the economic and market assessment as well for its viability. So one thing I do want to note about this concept as well is that the density of the land use, residential densities would be concentrated near the core of this area, and then it would fade into less and less dense, and then with adequate buffering and similar scaled and density residentials away from it on the perimeters, so that Blue Horizons, Windmill Village, and Sundance don't have people peering in their backyards, don't have a lot of intensity nearby, and to the greatest degree possible can even have enhanced buffers and separation than they would otherwise get to keep the neighborhoods protected. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next one and show this little close-up about the core. So what does it look like? So I've talked about it in some general terms of what it could look like. These pictures can represent different levels of intensity or density of what that is. Some of these are from local sources, some of these are from Atlanta, and others are just renderings and sketches that kind of give that concept of a pedestrian environment, Class A offices, mixed use, entertainment areas, outdoor plazas and parks, things that could be amenitized and attractions to bring people into this area and have outside tourism and outside residents bring their money to Buckeye. So that's really quick. Now, like I said, there was a lot of concern about how does this road maintain its throughput for the traffic, even if we do this split couplet. And I suggest that we've got great examples in the valley, notably Scottsdale, in Old Town Scottsdale with Drinkwater and Scottsdale Boulevard. The road splits around the core, that is the pedestrian mecca for tourism in that area, and generates an incredible value and notoriety for Scottsdale. It works there, it can work here, and the best part is we don't have anything that's restricting the ability for that to work here, because it's pretty blank. It's a blank slate. And this is illustrating the fact that the density would decrease as we get closer to those subdivisions and master plan communities on the periphery, with the real intensity focused in towards the core. The great opportunity with this is that without this kind of land planning consideration, there's very little the city has in their existing plans to make that a reality. This plan can make that a deliberate choice for development for where the intensity should be, but also maintain the amount of development right that a developer would expect to have in that area in terms of total units being built. Here's the second one. Now, this is a big deviation from the other, which used a more of a master planning kind of approach for providing the streets, parks, and residential areas. This one is developed more like a pre-planned grid. Might as well call it, City of Phoenix 2.0, I mean, to some degree, because it's a bunch of north-south streets, a bunch of east-west streets. All of these streets are designed in a way to be pedestrian-oriented, but because of the interconnectedness of this area, it can distribute the traffic throughout the area, reducing a focal point of traffic onto a singular road, other than the through traffic that would still want to get to the freeway. But this solution also gives a lot of pre-planned flexibility for state land in that they can more easily sell off, auction off, and parcel off chunks of this area because you know where the streets are going to go, you know what the infrastructure requirements are going to be, and the flexibility of this area really finds itself in allowing for the creativity of the development market to choose how, what, and what kind of development gets put in. A design language that kind of evolves as the development develops. So you see that the design of one development will dictate or influence the design of another and so on, so you can get these naturally formed or organic districts in this area. And it will allow for a lot of predictable route finding for pedestrians, and this is just kind of talking about how incremental sale. All of this is just could be picked off, chose from a 4-acre chunk, or 40-acre chunk to a 120-acre chunk to an 80-acre chunk. Some streets go through, some don't, but it gives a lot of flexibility with land planning to create the clusters, the development, the opportunities that might be really unique and attractive in this area. State land did give us a little bit of interest in this approach, but there are some risk factors with it. It's very infrastructure heavy with the grid, and that everything's got a street, everything's going to have water running, everything's going to have sewer. So that might make it a bit more expensive to develop. It would likely require probably more support from the city to make a reality, from a pre-planning, pre-financing, or whatever. But it does illustrate a new concept for how to approach land planning here, and one that's very different than what you would typically see in Arizona right now. It can create some very memorable locations that have a very high quality of life. One of the attendees at the community meeting noted that he used to live in Barcelona, Spain, which actually is the upper picture, is Barcelona, Spain, and that's what this is using as a concept for how this can be developed, which is known as one of the best quality of life communities in the world. So,
And real quick, let me interrupt you. Just so for clarity's sake, when you say the city's participation, you're referring to infrastructure and things like that.
Correct.
So I'm going to go right back to Councilmember Hagestad's point, is always growth pays for growth until it doesn't. And that's what you're talking about when you say that, correct?
Yep.
So this is the city's buy-in to this particular area that is something that we don't currently do anywhere else in the city.
This would be a consideration to say, do we want to prime the engine, so to speak, to get development to see the value of doing this? If we can show that there's a good return and it's worth it for the city to do so. Now, again, there's 100 different other factors to be thought about with that I don't have answers for at this point. We will have more refinement to that as we move forward. And let's just say that there's just no practical way that makes sense, then this concept just is a non-starter. But nonetheless, we wanted to bring diversely, significantly different concepts forward to have conversations, knowing that there's probably going to be some restrictions and difficulties with certain outcomes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Yep, no worries.
Can I just piggyback off of that? The idea that the city participates does not necessarily mean that we out of the general fund or property taxes
Right.
or whatever that looks like. And actually, that land plan does not necessarily mean that the city pays anything into it. It might mean that we participate by allowing a CFD or an improvement district. That
That's
might
true.
mean that this could be a developer coming in and taking the entire state land piece and then developing it in chunks. or what does happen, and we see this on, whether it's Vestar or maybe some of the employment tech projects, there's an investment made, but there's an almost immediate return on that investment that's paid back through the property taxes that primes. So it does, totally appreciate what you're saying. I don't think that we go out and just start building this, because then we got to do the same thing over here and over here, and that's not the intent at all. It's really to lay out here's a plan. There are potential ways that we can participate in that, but it's nothing that.
Right, this is one of our 3 low-hanging fruits on our general plan activities.
Yeah, exactly. For an activity center.
The one that we've done already is downtown. This
Correct.
one we're working on, and then the next one on our docket would be the airport.
Yeah, that area. Right.
Yeah, those are great comments, and definitely are part of the conversation we're having internally as well, to make sure that we're not being too aggressive one way or another without thinking about all of these factors or consequences that come from it. So this one still has Verado in a couplet, but a much smaller scaled couplet, more like Boston Commons, if anybody's been there, where it's more of an urban couplet with park area in the middle, but nonetheless you still get a nice, more activated community heart. But this whole concept with the grid, what's that?
No, Sean and I literally walked down that.
Oh,
At
nice.
the same time we just did this.
Yeah, it's not
We looked at it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Been there.
But the whole concept of the grid is that it doesn't necessarily have a center point heart in the same way that the first one did. This one is really about creating a broad sense of activity, neighborhoods, specialness throughout the area, and less focused on creating that like punchy, notable location. Rather, the district speaks as a whole to what it is instead of a destination. So the final one is a much more typically suburban approach, but I would not call it exactly suburban. It's about using the natural grade of the land, the retention and detention facilities that are in the area that could be developed as well through a greenbelt system, and in the desert, really, desert belts. Let's not call it a greenbelt, but I'll call it a greenbelt for planning purposes right now. That could be an amenity, not only for moving stormwater through the area, using ecologically sensitive ways to do that, protect the riparian, or create bioswales and riparian areas, but also become an economic, something that could activate economic growth in that area, create parks and trails and recreation connectivity through the area. And this is the one that has the smaller scale downtown in it. And it's that small red area on Verado Way, and this one just north of that east-west green belt. That's about the size of downtown Gilbert, just so you could understand how big this area is that we're talking about. And downtown Gilbert is a good downtown that's growing, developing great activity areas, good restaurants, good internight life. It's doing very well for itself and continuing to grow and spread. This is just illustrative of how much land we have to work with here. If that whole of downtown Gilbert, which isn't huge, but can be represented there, there's a lot of room for growth, and it just helps us understand the scale. Now, many people on the Planning and Zoning Commission mentioned that, this could be our version of the Riverwalk. That's definitely true, sans most of the water. But the important thing is that we can make it an Arizona-flavored Riverwalk, and that you have the Arizona-flavored environment and experience in these areas, with the natural areas, handling all the stormwater so you don't have stormwater on individual sites, using a regional solution, and being able to kind of integrate open space and recreation and stormwater management into one single item that's a regionally or area-wide benefit. Lastly, and all of these different concepts that I kind of haven't really touched on is that the area with the flood control district basin would be a recreational center point, either through co-use of the fields through the basin during its dry times for Reach 11 type soccer fields, baseball fields, pickleball courts, aquatic centers or recreation centers. Could be related to equestrian tourism, since there's the Maricopa Trail that runs through there. Regardless of which solution is chosen, that area is going to be a draw for and an opportunity for that outside tourism, as well as providing a really valuable community enhancement for recreation purposes. And we've already initiated many conversations with Maricopa County Flood Control District about that, and the viability of that. So zooming in just a little bit, some of the pictures to illustrate different ways that this could lay out. It would probably be much lower density than the other approaches. However, having a little bit more focus around the downtown Gilbert-sized core on Verrado Way, maintain Verrado Way as a regular arterial instead of couplet in this one, but have that integration to the areas just around it in a more walkable solution near the economic core, then quickly becoming single-family and two-family dominant to be compatible with the nearby neighborhoods nearby. So that's the really quick on that one. And there you go, we'll drill down into the Gilbert downtown area. So just to give you that concept. Wouldn't be much more than probably 3 or 4 story buildings, whereas the other ones are a bit more aggressive with the opportunity that could be there. It'd be a smaller area that's being used, far, far less than the other ones that were illustrated. However, bits and pieces of this can be chosen between all of these different concepts, you know, or even new things that we haven't even really talked about can be pursued. So we want all that feedback, not only from what we've got from the community, staff, and others, but we need council's feedback as well about where do they feel like the best opportunities might be for Buckeye. Some of those comments that we've received are up on this slide, you know, about Dean Road's non-negotiable. We have to promote it, we have to have Dean Road in, it needs to connect through, it needs to provide relief for Verrado Way, because it's only going to get worse as things develop. People have made it very clear that the separation and buffering is very important to them so that they don't feel that this new development is overwhelming the ones that are established and adjacent. Coupling that with making sure that people see the gateways clearly, where they're entering and leaving this area, where there's connectivity established and enhanced so that there's not always a need to push people to the arterials to get around. Find ways to connect directly from Blue Horizons with pedestrian and roadways rather than just pushing them down to Yuma, over to Verrado, and then back up and through. So all those different comments have been captured. This is just a smattering of them for the sake of discussion. And I think I've talked about virtually all of them so far. We still need to talk as we develop a more refined plan with our stakeholders. Again, these would be the property owners in the area that are the major developers, whether it's Abrazo, Westmec, State Land again, but we want to continuously keep them incorporated and moving forward with this so that they are champions of the vision, not just implementers. We want them to fully embrace this, and so far, they've been very, very helpful for helping us move this forward. So I'll just quickly say, through the end of the year, we're going to be completing some additional draft goals, policies, and narratives for these different areas, whether it's the campus area, the recreation area, or that mixed-use state land area. We'll be filtering those through staff for review, recommendations, and then to move this towards a more of a public draft document. Early next year, we will start to have the finalized land plans, the finalized public draft document, and additional engagement to introduce it to the community and then bring it back to you guys for review, adoption, and so on. So that's the quick and brief on that, but I would first really like to hear some of your initial thoughts. We had some good discussion earlier. Any other thoughts about what scenarios might be preferred? The neo-traditional, the grid, the greenbelt scenario, or if there are certain things that we talked about that you want to know more, or if there's things you want to include, happy to hear it, or things absolutely not to do, tell us that up front, and we'll make sure that we, strike that 1,000 times.
As long as we can keep it a lot less than the 17,000 people, I'd be alright with that.
A lot less, I'm sorry?
I think At first, it was like 17,000 people, right? Or not,
Yeah, and that's looking at the available number of units that can be built here at an average household size of like 3.2.
I'm just thinking that we have a lot more land to build on, so we don't have to make this one as dense. We can, cap it at, 8,000 people and then build more somewhere else.
Okay. Just food for thought, I'll make sure that we keep that comment. So the overall density of residential in this area being 2,000 acres per unit, this is somewhere around 3 or 4 DUs per acre. It's no different than a lot of the subdivisions around it. So it's a large area, which is why the number gets pushed up a little bit for population. But just
So the overall number density would be, you said 3 or 4?
right now, the overall density for this area is 3 to 4 gross dwelling units per acre.
And if I may add, Mayor mentioned it earlier in talking about the state land portion. So state land's the majority landholder in this area, and the thing they have repeated to us over and over is they're going for the highest and best use, which often for them, for the highest return, is going to be that maximizing the density where they can. So we're not saying it will end up at 17,000, potentially can be 17,000. So as you're looking at these different options here, that your input on the options is going to be really helpful for us, like I said at the beginning, to kind of formulate how this plan is going to shape as before we go back to the public for the next step.
And another consideration to think about is if we move this in a more suburban nature, let's just say we're more comfortable with single families, detached, mixed, missing middle housing. That likelihood of having a household size of 3.2 to 3.3 is much more likely in those scenarios with the same number of units, giving you the 17,000 people. If we push towards a more dense environment and say, well, we want to accommodate these 8 to 11,000 units, early findings of the market study and even comparables in the valley, when you start to do the mixed use, when you start to do a little bit higher density, you start to get single individuals, dual income, no kids, young families, so maybe you get that third. You're pushing the average household size down, lowering the population, lowering the trips, lowering the impact on infrastructure, but you still got the same number of units and probably have higher incomes with those dual incomes living in a smaller unit too. So those formulas need to be illustrated so we can look at those choices better, so that we just don't always think 17,000 people is going to be how many people are here no matter what. It's going to change depending on the type of land use solution chosen.
Okay, hi everybody, Ken Galika, Planning Manager. Welcome new council members. One of the reasons that we're also talking about density and residences in this location is because they need those additional rooftops to support the types of commercial uses that we want to see here.
Can I just
Yeah,
back up even before that?
sure.
The foundation that we're on. This area is contemplated as an activity center.
In the general plan. Sure.
So can you back it all the way to the activity center?
Correct,
And
yeah.
what the community has contemplated for this area with that designation and why we're going through this scenario that we're doing, and then talking about the densities that bring in the retail and commercial that we already said we're looking for in that area.
Yeah, so back in 2019 with the general plan update that was done at that time, approved by council and then ultimately ratified by the voters, that general plan currently in effect identified this area, about 2,000 acres, as what they called at the time the Buckeye Gateway Activity Center. And then they envisioned this as primarily a place that would support intense commercial types of uses. I don't want to compare it to like a downtown, because we have a downtown that serves a very special role.
You're late to the party, it's already been done.
But yeah, like more of a new nuevo downtown area for Buckeye. When I say that in terms of density, taller buildings, you know, more going on. So as part of that general plan update, identifying this area, this specific area plan is implementing that. So we want to try to make sure that we're putting this area in the best chance to succeed from the commercial standpoint, from the entertainment standpoint, from the office employment type of standpoint. And to do that, we need the people in that area. I hate to use real life examples, but for instance, those of you who have visited Festival know that there's not much commercial up there. It's because there's not that much residential in a compacted area. So we want to avoid, or on the other hand, we want to encourage the commercial by kind of flooding the zone with industrial, if you will, to get that critical mass necessary to support the unique commercial.
And to add to that, very simply, the landing, this project, it's going to create that framework and vision that we can take forward to everybody. I mean, right now, as a planner, I'm like, oh, everybody's just kind of developing without this framework and plan, and we're still at the beginning of it. And I think creating that framework and vision that's adopted by you as a council would be what we need to help guide that development as it's coming through there. I mean, because flavor of the day, like last year, was everything was warehouse. Everything must be a warehouse. But if we have that framework and plan, we can actually present that to development, to state land, in order to move forward with a structured development as part of that adopted plan. So,
And I guess otherwise, state land will put it up for auction, and it falls within that activity center area in our general plan. That's pretty broad. So you'll have a developer that picks it up, and then they have all kinds of ideas about what they want to see there. And this is such a special location within the community. One of, I think, 6, is that many activity centers we have in our general plan. So it's not just this location, it's not just downtown Buckeye, it's not just, or historic downtown Buckeye. It's not just the airport area, but there's a couple, few others that are spread throughout. This is our attempt at telling both state land and the developers, this is what we want to see in this specific area. Hence the plan that you're creating here. And it's, anybody can pick it up and just do a sea of tile roofs, and it's going to look like every other neighborhood that's throughout the Metro Phoenix area, and we'll lose an incredible opportunity to drive the development that we want to see happen in this location. And of course, it's with the infrastructure that has to be built. We're just talking about the planning right now that informs the infrastructure needs moving forward. So we have the land plan that's laid out, and then we know that this is what we need to do to Broadway to increase the capacity. This is Dean Road that adds capacity. Jackrabbit Trail is in design, that adds capacity. Roosevelt, McDowell, and you have that transportation framework that fits that area as well.
Correct. With that transportation framework that you just mentioned, how does, I would think that the first one you have there, the neo-traditional, with the Vanderway mega site just to the south and the access to that, they're when it be heavy industrial site, everything's going to be going right through that. How does that, how does that bode?
State Route 30, which is,
Okay, but in the meantime,
yeah, well, I mean, I don't think this develops and gets fully operational or Vanderways before you have significant strides being made toward State Route 30. So I think that stuff is kind of coming in potentially at the same time. There may be some underlap or overlap, but
Mayor and Council, if I may, this is also where you use this plan as a refinement of an expression of your policies for how you handle truck traffic and how you want to move forward. Now, while there might be some industry right now along I-10 that has truck traffic that's using Broadway as the means to get to the freeway, Jackrabbit is an opportunity that could become a truck route. Right? I mean, I'm not saying it's the only one. I'm not saying to push it out. I'm just saying you have abilities to consider alternatives to get the community you want, whether it's through where you guide traffic to be where you allow it to be, where you,
Well,
where
the
you
reality is
consider
that we can't
rezones.
do that, can we?
The city can or can't?
We cannot.
You cannot create truck routes.
We cannot create truck routes. We can create truck routes, but they don't have to be respected.
Correct.
Okay, so let's be very clear about that.
Just like speed limits.
Yeah, that doesn't have to be, it does not have, we can create it all we want, but if the trucker decides, I'm gonna go this way, it doesn't really matter, that's the way they're gonna go, just for clarity's sake.
It's true.
Okay.
You can encourage.
Yeah.
You can encourage,
You can plant
Doesn't
big
mean
trees
anything.
right next to the road.
I'm just saying, that we can,
Not-
we can't keep it off of it, we can plan for it, and we can create
I think it's,
route, but they don't have to use it.
you know, kind of as a segue, when I first saw this rendering, the, you know, transportation, how people are gonna get around it was the first thing. And then the second thing is that, you know, this area could be a good opportunity for trolleys or streetcars, which, you know, if you could park people in one place and then just move them around other ways, that, you know, you make the arterials narrow, which discourages truck traffic, and some other things. So I think that would be one thing, or I don't know if you considered it, or, you know, and you just didn't include it, or completely wiped it off the board, but I think, you know, to create that uniqueness, just get people moving around using, you know, smaller form public transit.
So, Councilman, Mayor, Council, I'm glad you mentioned that because I certainly did gloss over that or not even mention it in this presentation, sticking at a higher level. But in each of these areas that have more of a denser or mixed use concept, in fact, in all of them, we're examining transit opportunities, not necessarily saying that transit goes in day one, but as the area develops and evolves, we want to make sure the infrastructure can accommodate those solutions when the need is there. Micro-mobility, whether that's through e-scooters or e-bikes, which I know you seem like you really wanted to have those here.
Tony wants to say.
Yeah, autonomous, you know, just thinking about the future and all the things that could be developed or pursued to help improve people getting around without reliance on the vehicle in the environments that make sense to do so. The streetcars, the circulators, things like that. We've had some conversations about this area may be enticing to people who, let's just say, want to live in a more urban area, but they work in downtown Phoenix. Well, maybe they don't want to drive their car to, or even own a car, but live in an environment that is really special to them. There could be connectors that are established here between the park and ride on Jackrabbit and this area that cycles these people through there until more robust transit is developed in Buckeye and in this area. So there's a lot of different solutions that could be considered, and it's, you know, looking at all the potential solutions and how we could take advantage of some of those solutions if we have the right land use approach in place. That's what we're looking at. So we're certainly, all of those things that you had mentioned and more have been part of the discussion with the public and as part of our internal discussions.
Thank you.
Ken, are we, when this is said and done, is going to have the same level of underwriting, I guess, for lack of a better term, as the downtown specific area plan? Are we going that far with it?
Probably too soon to say. I just don't know. I think, you know, if it were the grid, potentially as much or more in that option. You know, something else, maybe not nearly as much. I mean, we're comparing it to like the Monroe Avenue improvements. It's just so hard to say. And you know, there's nothing that says the city would have to do the improvements. You could try to put that on the private development community, but my anticipation would be they would want to do suburban style development, and they would push back against that, saying it's not market kind of supported at this point in time.
Councilmember Barry, any comments or questions?
I would not like to see tall buildings in that area. Our logo's mountains. If you put the buildings too tall, you can't see mountains. So I'm more maybe two-story the most. but I like the look, just not such tall buildings.
Councilman, one of the things that we considered early on in April was view sheds. And as part of the discussion with the communities, we said we have great views to the mountains right now, both to the north and to the southeast, to the Estrellas. And with the final land plan is put together, whether or not we have tall buildings or short buildings, the intent was to be able to create view corridors through that area to preserve those view sheds so that they become part of the unique feel of the area and also add value to that area. Now, when we talk about the maximum height of buildings, you mentioned 2 stories. That's certainly something that we could look at. The codes that are in place right now allow for taller than 2 stories in virtually all of Buckeye and the commercial areas. And so that would be something that might run afoul of some of the private property rights expectations that the developers have. But on the flip side, for maximum heights, we're looking at a lot of discussion between 1 story to maybe, and again, this all is predicated upon market viability, 8. But we don't know if even that's reasonable. So we're just trying to keep all the options on the table for practices of this land planning exercise right now.
So the building that we call the landing, that's not too tall, but the one next to it, the bluish color one, I mean, that thing's, I don't know if you guys see, it's an eyesore.
Which one's that?
So the landing looks great up on Verado, but the building next to it, like this is, what is it, bluish gray, there's no, it's unoccupied.
The warehouse.
To the
Yeah,
south.
that big warehouse.
To the south.
Yeah, to the south of it, to the southwest of it. It's just extremely too tall, no matter where I'm at in the valley. I can see it and not see the base of the mountain. I don't like it.
I understand.
I don't want to build nothing like that.
Appreciate that. That's good guidance.
We've got just a couple minutes left. Councilmember,
Nothing else from me,
No.
thanks.
thank you. And Councilman Hagestad?
No, sir. All these things look great to me, but it is severely over my pay grade. I do not pretend to know how to develop land on these levels. Thank you.
So I think it might be worth maybe touring or just a slightly different perspective on what the activity center is and what we are trying to accomplish in this area. I disagree with the height of the building. I fully understand that the grayish blue, that's it's just a big warehouse building. But what we're trying to accomplish here, and I think what I've made pretty clear, especially with the Alliance folks that came in, is that this is exactly where we want to see that scale up. And you can create some really, really special environments with that scaled up, whether it's residential or it's like a Kierland concept or a Scottsdale quarter. This is our opportunity to do that. There are plenty of areas. The balance of Buckeye is going to be built with single-family homes that are the traditional suburban style. But this is where we've said we want that type of development, and this is exactly where we need to place that. I like aspects of all 3 of these, and I think that ultimately we share our thoughts and ideas out here, and you're going to have a developer that's got to try and make it work in the market.
Correct.
And he's going to say, well, I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to do Scottsdale Quarter, or I'm going to do some other development that is going to come into play, or it's a campus, maybe it's an ASU campus that fits in here, or some other university plus.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's thrown out the idea of the activity center. This is the scale we're looking. Here are some thoughts and ideas. So when somebody picks up the state land, they know what our expectations are and what they're getting into from a city perspective. But Ed, you're my hair idol, and I always appreciate what you and Matrix Group do for us. And I think the presentation's been fantastic, and the ideas are fantastic. I think it's great work out doing the roadshow, getting thoughts from the public, especially the folks that live in that area, about what they want to see moving forward. So thank you for the presentation.
Mayor, could I hear maybe you and the council would be interested in kind of a tour.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's similar to what we did for downtown Gilbert and,
Yeah.
and downtown Chandler, but maybe it's showing some of that more robust development, that's that walkable community, kind of, I mean, we could go have lunch in Carolyn, that would be just fantastic. But showing that with the way that scales up and then immediately scales right back down to those single-family homes that live just outside of,
Right.
or I mean, it could be a Tempe, where you are seeing some kind of campus.
Yeah.
And then downtown, at that urban environment that scales right back down to single-family homes just outside of.
I think we can, staff can take the lead in putting something together in the first couple months of the new year, hopefully.
Yeah.
And after the nice words you said about Ed, hopefully he'll attend without giving us a new bill.
No man hunts.
Let's
though.
get that on the record.
I heard Barcelona though for the tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard Barcelona.
Just real quick on that, just from my, to give you a little bit of direction on that, I would be much more leaning towards a grid concept than the divided than that.
Okay, good feedback.
I appreciate
All right,
that. Okey-doke.
all right. Thank you, guys. Item number 3 is adjournment with nothing else on the agenda. We are adjourned.